Welcome, Doug Winnie. He's an award-winning certified executive and business coach, speaker, motivator, team strategist, and a cash flow and profit expert. Cash flow and profits are the spine of business. Given his past experience, Doug is a spinal specialist. As a business coach, Doug has added substantial value to multiple organization financial statements, both in decreased costs and increased revenue by current management and motivational techniques. If you have been worried about the challenging times and how robust your business will remain, Doug is here to help. Over to you, Doug.
Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Many of you guys are been doing this for about 10 hours. How's the audio working?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome, very good. And then let's see here. My video is on. If you want, how do I, let's see, switch to me. Let's see here. Can you see me or no?
Yes, we can see you.
Oh, good. Okay, I can't see you. Fantastic. All right. Well, just as long as you can see me, that's all that matters. Perfect, perfect. Well, good. So honored to be in your group today. I really appreciate it. And thinking about the actual mindset of an entrepreneur is quite an amazing topic. Having been in coaching for about 10 years, a little over 10 years, growing my own businesses, sold 2 of my multi-million-dollar businesses. I start from scratch. And then helping business owners do the same for the last 10 years, I've learned a lot about what we think about. And what we think about does lead to what we actually do. So today I'm going to invest just about 30, 45 minutes into helping everybody understand what goes on between our ears. And then how does that really change when we have a true entrepreneur mindset. So with that, I'm going to get started and just help you understand that, well, first, there is the concept of, well, what is an entrepreneur? Really, there's 2 elements here. We got the entrepreneur and we got the mindset. So when we think about the entrepreneur, from Brad Sugars, we've learned that it's a process, it's a ladder. If you think about it, we start off as a student. We're learning what to do. We're learning how to operate in society. Today, we're learning a little bit about how to operate maybe without a society. Being quarantined, self-quarantine, things like that. We're learning lots of different things. Eventually, we move up to be an employee, right? We're being paid by somebody else to still learn. And some of you may be employees, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just an interesting stage on the entrepreneur ladder. Someday we go, hey, you know, I'm tired of working for somebody else. Let me go work for myself. Then you move up to being self-employed. Now, each one of these rungs in the ladder has a different mindset. That of a student is totally different than that of being self-employed. So being a one-person operation, we do help lots of those types of businesses, and really thinking about what is the difference between a student or even an employee and being self-employed. So right now, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt to the self-employed, because they're thinking, how will I indeed make a living? What will I do? I was asked yesterday by somebody locally, how do I survive a recession? And so that was a very interesting question, because if you're an entrepreneur, you're not actually thinking about survival. An entrepreneur will be thinking about thriving. I realize that we are in tough times. The tough times are going to be very short-lived. Just like all other tough times, they are a small blip on the entire spectrum of a life. So there's just a difference between, you know, self-employed and entrepreneur. Moving up the ladder, we start to hire people and say, hey, what's it like if I'm managing other people? And maybe it's a little easier. Maybe it's a little more challenging. This is where we start to think about others, not just ourselves. So certainly today's times mean that we're having to cover payroll. We're going to have to maybe let some people go. We have to understand, as the manager and then eventually the owner, there is an entity, another entity, and that's the business. The business entity must survive. So during the COVID pandemic crisis that we have going on, we have to think of another entity, and that being the business itself. Finally, we move up here to investor, where we're starting to invest in other areas. another great opportunity. Right now, the stock markets are quite depressed. I loved hearing maybe a week ago, hearing the founder of Action Coach talking about he got back into the market because everything was on sale. In less than 30 days or so, everything went down 50%, 75%. So all of these stocks are way undervalued. Absolutely, they're likely to hit another bottom. Point is that they're not going to continue to devalue because they've got assets. They're a business. They have an entity, right? Finally, the top rung of the ladder is the entrepreneur. This is where we start to create money with other people's ideas, network, connections. The entrepreneur is at the top of this rung. Some of us have reached it. Some of us want to reach it. Some of us are still at the lower levels. So today I'm trying to explain a little bit about what goes on in the mindset of an entrepreneur. So kind of thinking about our mindset, right? So what maybe right now we want to think about the entrepreneur mindset and kind of, right, are there thinkers? Are there doers? There are thinkers. I run into a lot of thinkers, right? And they kind of overthink. And then there's some that are doers, and some do without thinking, which could be dangerous. Right? Now, what is it that you might be? Right? Might you be a thinker, maybe an overthinker, and slow to do? Some of you are probably doers and maybe don't think enough. A great entrepreneur does a little thinking and a lot of action, right? Because in today's world, there's so much knowledge. There's so much availability of what to do. It's few that actually go out and do it. So I'm just curious. I see there's well over 100 people online today. Go ahead and type in the questions box, in the chat box. Do you think you're a thinker? Are you more of a thinker? Are you more of a doer? I'm just curious to see, well, A, are you still awake? I know it's been 10 hours of this. B, curious to see, where are we? Are we more of thinkers? Are we more of doers? So just give you guys just 2 seconds. Type in the questions box or the chat box. Are you thinker, doer? Or are you pretty sure you're 50-50? Just curious about that. Interesting. Okay. A few people typing in information here. Couple doers, more thinkers. I'm curious, where are all the doers? Do we think a lot? Do we do a lot? Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for a reboot. Maybe we have to really get into thinking and then doing, right? Because the mindset of an entrepreneur is, well, somebody who just takes a little bit of knowledge and then adds lots of action. So we're going to think of how do we reboot our mindset? How do we do what we need to do faster? Because in today's day, your action is going to be really critical. Here I'm in Houston, Texas, in USA, and you know, the restaurants are mostly closed. Now, some restaurants have put up instant, if you will, drive-throughs. Those are doers. They already know what a drive-through is. They see it at McDonald's. They see it all over the place. They also know they're not allowed to have people in their restaurant. So they put up tents and they made makeshift drive-throughs. Those are entrepreneurs. They're thinking about, what do I do next? How do I deal with this particular bump in the road? Some will call it a wall. Regardless of what you call it, it's get through it, get around it, get over it. You have to think differently. You actually have to act much faster. So thinking about how our brains actually work. So one of the things to consider is that I like to say that our brain, our mind, well, it's wired sort of like freeways, right? It's synapses, right? You might remember from biology that we actually have all of these wires, if you will, in our head. And they're very much, well, you know them as habits. If you think about a habit, right? It's just a whole bunch of synapses connected together, and we do it sort of automatically. We don't even necessarily think about it. We just do it, right? Now, if I was in a live conference, one of the things I might do is play the national anthem, right? And when I play the national anthem, right, wherever country I'm at, well, the audience would stand up. Some will put their hands over their hearts. Some do other symbolic measures. Now, in all the countries I've spoken at, I don't know most of those national anthems. Of course, I know the one in America, right? Now, why is it that I know mine and you know yours, but we don't know each other's? Or why is it that I have an accent versus you guys having accents? We were all born the same, yet we were raised and we started to hear different words, and we start to create new synapses. And all of a sudden, you have your accent, I have my accent. And of course, all around the world, we have different accents and we speak different languages. Now, this is all because of what I like to say is somewhat of a circuit board. If you really think about it, we're wired. And the wiring is sort of like a circuit board on a computer. Now, the good news is we're very dynamic. We can rewire our circuit board. It's just not easy. It's very doable. So when you start thinking about the entrepreneur mindset, right? How do we create the right mindset? And, I love to say this one thing, and you guys can all fill in the blank. We are all creatures of, I'm sure you're probably thinking, the answer is we are all creatures of habit, right? But the reality is, no, we are not actually creatures of habit, right? We are really creatures of imitation, right? So we imitate others. I was with a speaking coach not long ago, and he said something like, we are not the voice today that we are born with. I was like, what does that mean? We're not the voice today we're born with. He said, we're all born with pretty much the same voice. It just became the voice that we have because we have imitated our parents, our grandparents, our teachers. Thus, the reason that we have the voice or the accent. We have imitated others to the point that these have become synapses in our head. And that's exactly what happens as we keep imitating. And we imitate and we imitate, and that becomes a habit. And then we kind of just do it automatically. We've seen very good actors and actresses have wonderful accents. They could be born and raised anywhere in the world. When they're on the TV show or on the movie screen, they sound like somebody different. Well, they've just learned to imitate another voice and then have done just that. So good news, we can imitate the mindset of an entrepreneur until it becomes a habit. So let's think a little bit more about this process of imitation. Right now, officially, it's called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity basically describes how experiences reorganize neural pathways in the brain. And they become long-lasting functional changes, and they occur when we learn new things or memorize new information. And then the new neural connections become, well, permanent until they go away. Right? So understand, we must have imitation before habit. Now, really wondering, who are we imitating? If we think about it, who is it that we are imitating? Right? I like to say architect, right? So who is the architect of what we're thinking about? Well, it's sometimes it's interesting, but sometimes it's also sad, right? The architects are they're our parents, our teachers, our brothers, our sisters. We may even imitate our children, the clergy, right? Newspapers, TV shows, politicians, leaders, our bosses, coworkers, even TV advertisements. These are all our architects. And of course, I love the fact that we always Well, we always have faith in our architect, right? And yet sometimes, especially now, I see this, well, I see this a lot. At least here in the United States, you know, the real virus, the real one, is probably the news here. It probably is the news, right? Because we hear all of the bad things, all of the people getting ill. We're not keeping track of those that aren't. We're only keeping track of those who are. So the synapses that are being built are really about fear, and that, you know, it's really bad. And yes, I agree, we should wash our hands. We should say, stay away from others. The reality is the news is the one that's our architect, if we let it be. Right now, working from home, this is, I think week 5 for me, working from home in my makeshift studio here. And so really, that first week, it was at a kitchen table, and I had up on the news on the big screen TV in the other side of the room, and I was doing a variety of coaching sessions with clients. And man, my mindset just started going down and down, and really horrible. I mean, quite bad. And I didn't know what was going on, right? I started to have fear, and the world is going to end, and all my clients are going to close, and it's just really bad, right? And it's because I was letting an architect infiltrate my synapses and start to building freeways that I really did not want to have. And really thinking about these freeways, right? You know, I want the freeways that I want, right? We understand that the fears are going to come from our architects. Well, limitations come from our architects. I remember, you know, long time ago, somebody said, it was my parents, never ever, I mean never ever start a business. Because my parents had businesses. My mom had a maid service business and my dad had a painting business, and both were, well, good in their business. They learned how to clean, they learned how to paint. They hired a few employees. And we grew up pretty poor. We were on government assistance several years. My parents divorced after 17 years. It wasn't very, you know, looking back, it wasn't very good for them. Now, they raised me and my 3 brothers quite well. We did fine. We didn't know how bad things might have been, but it was good. I mean, it was fine for us. Eventually, hey, can you shut that? Eventually, looking back, I realized that my parents weren't very happy, right? And so when it came to raising their 4 boys, they're like, don't ever own a business. That would be bad. Now, I, like many kids, kind of do the opposite our parents tell us to do. So I did start multiple businesses and been very successful. Now, the real only difference between me and my parents was that I learned how to be an entrepreneur. They didn't learn that, right? So we have to pay attention to our architects. So, you know, we get our limitations from our architects. We get our fears from our architects. We also can get opportunities from the architects, right? So as I grew my other businesses and then eventually sold them, and then I get into Action Coach, and then Brad Sugars became an architect, and other coaches became architects. And I started to learn about opportunities from the architects I picked. I also learned how to start picking better architects, right? And understand that we can be our own architects, right? And so, you know, thinking about the architects, you know, who are we picking, right? You know, I'm honored to be an architect right now for you. I am helping you learn, well, in this case, how to pick better architects, right? Multiple speakers today, all teaching how to be better between marketing and sales and operations and finance and team and even, of course, a lot of the medical stuff. We've learned a lot about viruses and bacteria over the last month or so, and well, sadly, we'll probably learn some more, right? And eventually it'll be good for us, right? I was reading that maybe because of all this, there'll actually be a cure for the common cold. Wouldn't that be cool, right? They're trying to fix that for a long time. Maybe it'll turn out to be something that will help mankind long term. Short term, we've got some challenges. I promise you the biggest challenge is likely an opportunity if you let it be an opportunity. Now, I'm curious, what are some of the limitations, maybe even fears that we all have, right? So just type in the chat box, just curious, what are some of the fears that exist in your world, or even, we'll say, somebody else's world? You don't even have to be honest, right? So everybody here, a lot of people here are anonymous, which is fantastic, right? But what would be some of the fears, some of the self-limiting beliefs that you have, or maybe, you know, I don't know, your spouse has, or a friend has? Doesn't have to be you, right? Well, what are some of the fears that are existing out there? Just want to see some of those. Can't do, fear of failure is a very common one. What else? Let me hear some others. I can tell you that I don't know, some people have overcome some, which is great, right? What about fear of doing online presentations? It was an interesting fear, right? Cash, will my cash run out? Absolutely a fear, yes. Yes, right, this is a very good one, right? Fear of being mocked, right, during a presentation or something like that. Yeah, so even fear of speaking, right? So really, I was raised not necessarily to be afraid of speaking, yet it became a huge fear of mine, right? So, you know, it's kind of like there's the speaking of fear, but you can swap those around and have a fear of speaking, right? Speaking of fear, or fear of speaking, right? So how is it that people are, you know, grow up to be afraid of public speaking? Well, some are taught by their parents, don't talk to strangers. So if it's built into your head through these synapses over and over and over again, don't talk to strangers. Well, I don't know that I've met maybe anyone on the other side of this camera, right? I don't know, maybe I've met a few of you guys at some of our conferences. But I mean, most everybody I have not ever met. So, you know, there is the fear of public speaking. Now, in my particular case, I was a young lad in kindergarten. And one of the things that I was in was a little chorus. And at a ripe young age of just 7 years old, I'm in a little choir. And one of the things we're going to do is going to go up on stage and sing to a bunch of principals. And it was a fun day. And we had studied and learned the music, and it was a great, you know, great thing. And we got ready to get up on stage. And I was the second person in line, and it was based on height. So I'm guessing based on height, I was one of the shorter people. So I was second person in line and going to get up on stage. And right before we get up on stage, well, the first person in line, the teacher came over and moved the first person in line someplace else. Apparently they grew a little bit taller. So now I was one of the shortest people, maybe the shortest. So now I'm first in line. And it's time to go up on stage. So I'm first on line, and I get ready to walk up the stairs, and I trip. I trip and I stumbled across the stage. Now, an audience of about 100 adults. I stumble across the stage. What do 100 or so adults do? They giggled. They laughed. So at some point, from that point forward, what was inbred in my head, which became a synapse, a neural pathway that became thicker and thicker over the years, was people will laugh at me or mock me on stage. And not until I was 44 years old did I start to get over this particular challenge. And I realized that to do what I do, to become a really good, influential business coach, leader in my community, I need to learn to get over being afraid of public speaking. So it was not easy, right? But even today, right, I don't have any fear of speaking to you today across the world. Last October, I got to speak to 3,200 people in a large stadium. Again, no fear. Now that's taken some time and some practice and building the new freeways, because this is how this works. A freeway that is built must be used until there's a new freeway. So the fear of speaking publicly is a fear that I would have forever, for my entire life, unless I built a new freeway. And some of the fears or habits that we all have are going to be the freeways we use until you build a new one. Right? Some of the other freeways that I've had are things like go to college, get a job. I mentioned already, don't be an entrepreneur. Here's a nice one that some of us pretty much have. Well, that's just too expensive. I'd never buy that expensive of a car, or I'd never build that expensive of a house, or I would never own that expensive watch. Where did those freeways come from? Who built those freeways? Who was the architect for that? You want to remember that new freeways were going to replace old freeways, right? But you have to have the right architect. Now, really, really good news, right? You're the architect. You're the chief programmer. You're the person who says, hey, I'm managing me. I'm going to manage my mindset. And so let's think a little bit about the critical elements of an entrepreneurial mindset. What are the critical pieces, right? So, oh my goodness, come on. Checking things. Right. So let's just type in the chat box. What are some of the really good mindsets of an entrepreneur? Let's just type in there. Let's see if we can come up with a couple that are really important mindsets of an entrepreneur. I've got several here, but before I talk about those, let's see what you guys say. Positive mindset, absolutely. Being optimistic. Risk-taking, right? Manage risk, yes. Encourager, optimist, innovation, growth mindset. Have a heart to serve, excellent. Good ones, some really good ones coming out, I like. Innovation, nice. Leadership, team leader, collaborative. Growth mindset, yes. Good stuff, very good. Yeah, oh, look at all these really good ones. Patience, oh, I need to work on that one. Have empathy, be compassionate. Yes, a lot of these are some of the things of a leader, right? We might be missing some of those from an entrepreneur. So think a little harder. Think of entrepreneur, team builder. Risk taker. There's a good one. Solution provider, yes. Right. Identify problems of customers, provide solutions to customers, yes. Money management, solution provider, being excited. I'm not sure about this one. Well, it's listed as frugal, right? Maybe frugal might not be the right word. Might be a freeway you have, but it might not be the right one. Caretaker, good stuff, right? So here's a couple of the ones that come to mind for me, right? So opportunity, right? So understand, what is the opportunity? An entrepreneur understands opportunities, right? So there's the glass is half full, the glass is half empty. Which is it? Half full, half empty, right? Some will go, well, it's half empty. Some will go, it's half full. It's being filled, right? The opportunities are huge. Think today, if you happen to be, well, one of our clients is an online Amazon reseller. An online Amazon reseller. Now, 2 months ago, they were doing about $250,000 US dollars a year. Now they're doing $7, maybe $8 million a year. They've gone up at least 28-fold in 45 days. Now, as an entrepreneur, this particular client of ours decided to sell tuna fish, canned tuna fish, because a lot of people want canned goods because of fear, because of the thought that maybe they won't be able to buy goods, buy food in the future. So he became a huge reseller of something as simple as canned tuna. That's called an entrepreneur mindset. Right? So, there's a great book out there by Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K, called Growth Mindset. Right? So having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. There's a big difference between fixed mindset and growth mindset. So really want you to think about, how do you have a growth mindset? And I promise you that you can build one. Because if I can build freeways that say, I can deliver great education, I can influence, I can inspire people through speaking, I can educate, I can even give directions, and I can really change people's lives, well, now through a camera, right? And so if I can do that, having 40 years of, well, let's just say 35, 37 years of fear of public speaking, if I can build that new freeway, you can build any freeway, and I can build any freeway, right? A doer mindset. So I'll say being a person of excellence, right? I watched one show by this gentleman here, actually lives down the street. This guy's name, Joel Osteen, a large pastor and I guess Christian pastor. And he one day said that everyone should become a person of excellence. And by definition, a person of excellence is someone who will do what they need to do, even if they don't want to. A person of excellence is someone who will do what they need to do, even if they don't want to. So when I think about that, how do you get a doer mindset, right? Become a person of excellence, right? An entrepreneur will persist in challenged times. A very simple phrase is, this too shall pass. Today's pandemic crisis will pass. It is a couple months long. And yes, there's likely to be financial hardship for some afterwards. There's likely to be layoffs, right? All of these things are very likely to be true, but they too shall pass. Right? Also, you know, there's another saying that smart people learn from their mistakes. Wise people learn from mistakes of others. So learn from others. You know, I love Jim Rohn, sadly passed away 10 years ago, actually 11 years ago, right? But, you know, it was really amazing what he talked about, that all of the knowledge of the world are in books, but far too few read him. And then even fewer will do after they learn. Right? So we want to start to figure out, what is it that you don't yet have? What do you not yet have in terms of an entrepreneur mindset? And so you start thinking about that, and let's just talk about what are some of the tools to indeed have the mindset that we want. So number one is I am statements. So one of the things that we can actually do is decide what it is you want and put it into an I am statement. Now, some of you probably have been taught this before, but really briefly, let me just reteach it or teach it to those who haven't heard it. An I am statement is, I'll start with saying, it's something you want that you don't yet have. An example of an I am statement for me was, I am a dynamic public speaker receiving rave reviews. Now, that I am statement wasn't true at the time I started to say it, and I said it over and over and over again. Or, I am a watch collector. That was one that I created. I am a proud parent, and I wasn't at the time. I wrote, I am the #1 business coach in the world. It took me 4 years to get there. So now I still stay in the top 5 or so, right? But an I am statement is something you don't yet have that you want. Now, how this works is really pretty cool. If you say it to yourself out loud twice a day, say it as early in the morning as you can, like you get out of bed and you say your I am statements. My very first I am statement that I've had for probably 8 years is, I am a person of excellence. When I say that one, everything else starts to happen. Right? Now, I say it right in the morning when I wake up, out loud, and I also say it right before I close my eyes and go to sleep. Because you probably also know that your brain doesn't sleep. It actually continues. Right? It will continue to work. Matter of fact, it goes into hyperdrive. It even works faster. So if you feed it good knowledge before you go to sleep, it'll start to work on it. Right? So if I wrote and I said out loud, I am a dynamic public speaker receiving rave reviews, when I go to sleep, my brain starts to work on that. It starts to think, how do I do that? How will I come up with that? So the secret is saying it out loud right when you wake up and right before you go to sleep. Now we teach you should have 20 of these. And what you do is you just keep repeating them over and over and over again, every night before you go to sleep and every morning when you get up. Now this particular strategy is about building your freeways. And well, the good news, you're the architect. You pick them. You pick the freeways that you want. Now, here's a really good example of how well it works. Many of us, many of you, will go and perform your religion, whatever that happens to be, on Sundays or Wednesdays or daily or whatever you happen to do. And guess what you do there? You speak out loud a variety of phrases. And over the years and over the decades, what you speak becomes fact, meaning it is fact for you. And we all know there's dozens and maybe hundreds of religions, and each person believes theirs to some extent, to the point that they will literally kill others for not believing what they believe. Now, that's an extremist. We don't want to go there. But that's how the freeways work. Right? So you get to pick which freeways you want. You want to be a dynamic public speaker? You want to be a phenomenal leader? Create those I am statements. Do them twice a day. I've had people lower their blood pressure, become healthier, have more energy, become awesome entrepreneurs, all because of I am statements. The second thing is, be sure to limit your bad architects. Right? Be really careful about your architects. Right? The newspapers, the news agencies, right? Even speakers. And sometimes, I mean, I've gone to different religious groups and I've had to leave because what that person was speaking was negativity. And I'm like, you know, my brain is too precious. My mind is too precious. I must leave. And I left. Right? Audio books, video books, right? Watching videos, right? Catch yourself in actual the wrong thoughts, right? Really want to start to pay attention to these kinds of things. We want to recognize that your mindset is a skill set. The mindset of an entrepreneur you can build, and you probably weren't born with it. Let's put it this way. You weren't born with it. You either created it, or somebody else created it, or didn't create it, right? So the mindset is a skill set. Learn to improve it, become an entrepreneur, and then you will achieve more. Really quite important to understand that. Right? So remember the 4 points. And I think we are just about out of time. Yes, Pradeep has a question. Please type your question in for sure. And I think we're just about out of time. Let me just double check to see how we're doing on time. I know it's time for you guys to cook dinner. Just double check here. A question. So I saw there's a question here. Go ahead and type your question in the box, the chat box. We have 5 minutes for question and answer. Catch yourself. So great question. How do you indeed catch yourself, right? So it's being conscious about what seems to be unconscious, right? So the great example is me going to a church and being there and listening to, negativity. And I went, wait, that's catching myself going, wait, I'm the controller of what I put in to my head, to my brain, to my mind. So I caught myself and decided, nope, this isn't for me. I'll leave. Right? You could be watching some great show on TV, and then it switches right into the news, right? And the news's job is to keep you. And they'll talk about something that's critical. Sounds critical. The volume will be loud, and at news at 10, see this death and destruction happening down the street. And well, because of us being human beings, right, we have to protect ourselves. And so what happens is that we're like, oh, I have to find out what's going on. I have to protect myself. I have to protect my family. Therefore, I have to listen. Well, no, you really don't have to listen, right? You could switch it off. So that's what catch yourself is. Yes. Other questions? We got about 3 more minutes for Q&A. Any other questions?
Doug, hi, this is Tabish here. I'll kind of moderate the questions for you quickly. That's coming in the Q&A chat box.
Yes.
So such a profound session, Doug. It was immensely useful. I can see, there's just a statement that you've said. We are all creatures of imitation. This is so profound. I think the whole thing around we trying to imitate people with their successes and wanting to try and be that is something that we have to be very, very careful about. And you're saying catch yourself doing this thinking. We're probably trying to be somebody completely different than who you really are. And
and it's imitate those habits that the others are doing, right? So some are really good, and here I would say that I teach, and I know a lot of us would teach, have 3 months cash flow, right? Because that allows you to deal with, in this case, particular challenges, right? So I've learned in the last month or so, 6 months is a better term. We should have 6 months cash flow to deal with challenges, right? Now I've learned that just recently, so that becomes one of my new learnings, if you will, and my new synapses, right? Also, like speaking louder. Right? That's a critical thing. Where did I learn that? Well, I went to a speaking coach and they taught me, which became new synapses. A lot of people will have a quiet tone, and that becomes who they are. Well, no, I'm just quiet. No, you're not just quiet. You've chosen or been taught to be quiet. That's all. Right? So think of the leader who's really timid. I can't think of any. right? So timidity, if you will, is a learned behavior. You could learn another behavior. So I caution us in thinking that we are who we are. No, I say we are who we were created, right? You can become, I have become a dynamic public speaker because I chose to do it. I imitated other people's behaviors and have become mine now. But really good thought there.
Excellent point, Doug. Thank you so much. I think that just one last question. We've just about hit time. There is, because of the current COVID situation that we are in, there's this huge fear around money. And the belief that there's not enough, and there's not enough money that's available, and money is scarce. Any recommendations and I am statements that we think we should practice so that we don't make other people's thinking your own? Maybe you're better off than most others, but then you're probably just telling yourself, I'm in a big soup. I'm in a major difficulty. Any I am statements, or how do we come out of this fear? Any direction on that?
Well, actually, yeah, it's about perseverance. So I am a person who perseveres through all challenges, right? And so that could be an I am statement, because the belief that there isn't enough money, well, the actual money supply didn't change. The same quantity of money is still available today. It just is slower to be transferred because people will hoard the money right now, right? Fewer people will order restaurant food. And so all it is a slowing down of the transfer of money. Same money supply. So here our subconscious tries to create the fears while our conscious can control the subconscious. We can actually consciously slow our breathing, right? So many things that we're taught is an unconscious behavior could actually be controlled with conscious thoughts or statements. And this is what an I am statement is for, is to help the conscious mind build the freeway of the subconscious mind. And it's really amazing how well it works. But there's really two things. One is that you have to do it and you have to believe it. And I can end with that. You have to do it, and you really do have to believe it, because it works. I mean, I'm a living example. I was not a business coach. I wasn't a successful business coach. And so I wasn't a public speaker. I wasn't a parent. I wasn't the owner of a Tesla. There's so many things that I have created because I consciously made the decision to do those I am statements, and then I believed that what I wrote and I said would come true. And it works. So thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And I know you guys have done an amazing job today, and you have another amazing one tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Doug. I think tremendous learning from you today, for not just the entrepreneur community that's online, but also the coaches who are all here huddled together as one. So thank you again for joining in. Satyam, over to you.
Thank you. We couldn't have asked for a better closing than this. Your session made the whole day so special, and I'm sure the attendees would have loved it. I thank you on behalf of the Action Coach community and the attendees for taking out time and being here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
As a token of appreciation, we have a small certificate for you. Once again, thank you so much. It was
yes, thank you. You guys have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.